In this video, let's talk about my 3 worst investment mistakes that I've personally made during my time as an investor. And importantly, I want to share with you guys what were the key lessons, like what was the takeaway or the finding from this lesson, and how did it end up shaping how I now invest today. The reality is that as an investor, and particularly as a DIY investor, we're gonna make a countless number of mistakes. And as I was doing my notes for this video, I had a whole slew of mistakes that I could have drawn from. I wanted to boil it down to the 3 that I felt had the most impact. Like, knowing what I know today, if I could go back and tell my younger self, don't do these 3 things, that's what we'll be covering. Leave a comment down below, you guys, if you have a mistake that you're willing to share from your experience as an investor, or any thoughts that you guys have on mine. Again, these are just personal, and I have stories kind of attached to each one. But the first mistake that I think investors make, and certainly I have made in the past, is when you let your personal biases or your personal perspectives and viewpoints influence and impact your investment decisions. And I think some great examples before I share my example was, we talk about home bias often on the channel here, which is the tendency for Canadians to invest heavier in Canada than maybe they should. Certainly when you think about people in Alberta, right? You think of someone from Calgary or someone from Edmonton, if you do see what they invest in, oftentimes there's a pretty heavy skew towards the Enbridges and the Suncors and the energy companies out there. I tend to notice it a lot with younger kids. So let's assume someone just came out of university and they got a job at Microsoft or Meta, like they're working in the tech space. Well, their portfolios are like 100%, arguably over allocated to tech, because that's the world they're in, and that's the world that consumes their life, and that's what they see around them. So that impacts what they do with their investments. And it's interesting because a counter argument to that is one of the magic parts about DIY investing, and one of the exciting aspects is that you can draw from your personal life and maybe some insight that you have or some knowledge that maybe other people won't have. Actually, I'm just thinking back to One Up on Wall Street, which is a classic book for anyone to read. One of the key takeaways I got from Peter Lynch in that book was drawing from your personal life experience to help find some gems in the market. And again, that's one argument to be made. But I guess the mistake is when you put too much weight on those personal beliefs and biases, that you'll neglect some of the more traditional researching approaches that you should be factoring in. And to give you guys the personal example, I was looking back over my channel. This goes back 4 years now. So for those of you that remember, leave a comment down below if you've been sticking around. But I made the decision to make my largest portfolio position, place a big bet on the company Tencent. Tencent Holdings, ticker TCEHY. Yeah, Tencent. And essentially where that stemmed from was, at the time, I'd done my research and I thought the metrics looked good. I thought the business looked good. But importantly, I had just gotten back from some trips to Asia. So visiting Taiwan, visiting Shanghai, and I was just blown away personally by some of the technology and some of the stuff over there. I had this personal bias or belief system that, wow, like China's the future and this is, where you want to be. Back in the day, this is 4 years ago now. So during the pandemic, I played a lot of League of Legends. So that was one of my hobbies or pastimes. So, all my life is just like not all my life, but a lot of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, like surrounded by these games and these products owned by Tencent. So that certainly, I would say, influenced my belief or my optimism for a specific company. In this case, I actually looked back at the history of the channel, and then a year later after purchasing that stock, it was down 50%. 1 year later, it was down 72%. And these are referring to both my Chinese positions. All that to say, it clearly didn't work out in my favor. And the lesson that I drew from that is that it's so easy, particularly when you're buying a stock or even an ETF, just buying some sort of investment, especially when there's biases at play, to overlook the downside and just kind of see what's the upside. Really, you're like, oh, this is the future, or it's so much easier to be optimistic. But what I would take away from that now is trying, as always, to keep a very grounded and a very level approach, where even if I have a personal hunch or belief on something, that has to make sense with the other factors and the other variables at play. And I'll say it's easier said than done. It's something that I think we do, honestly, probably not just in investing, just in everyday life. Our biases skew our perspective and opinion on things, but that's certainly one thing that I do try to keep with me, even today, right, when it comes to my portfolio. The second mistake that I believe I've made, fast forwarding now to being 20 years in the market, is not utilizing ETFs earlier. And I guess in fairness, if I were to make somewhat of an excuse, when I first started investing, like ETFs were nowhere near popular as they are today. Actually, when I first started investing, I invested in mutual funds. So I bought 2 stocks, which you guys will know is McDonald's, Coca-Cola with the help of my dad, but the vast majority of my money was in mutual funds. Now, as I ended up pursuing a career, working with my father, getting licensed, working for 4 years in the space, my portfolio evolved to eventually phasing out of the mutual funds and being all individual stocks. But I think I could have incorporated ETFs earlier than I did. And you guys will know, like, my portfolio now is 95% ETFs, super passive. I think I could have worked that in a few years earlier, like to when I did. We've talked about the benefits like number of times. In fact, that's actually a lot of what I cover on the channel now, is because that's what my portfolio is like, and the pros and cons of ETFs. They're such incredible products. They've been evolving so fast, and the amount of options that you have available, like you could pretty much find an ETF for anything now. That wasn't the case maybe even like 10 years ago, but nowadays some of the hottest new products on the market and where most of the attention is being developed as the space is evolving is the optionality that we have with the ETFs. So I'm not necessarily saying here that you as the investor should be doing ETFs instead of stocks. That's your personal choice, that's up to you. But I'm saying there's even scenarios where you can, if it's not the whole portfolio of ETFs, you can utilize ETFs for a portion of your portfolio, like getting exposure to an ARK ETF or a covered call ETF for X amount of your portfolio, a bond or fixed income ETF. Use those products because they're so low cost, they're so effective. And in my opinion, I guess one of the maybe poor mindsets I had on it back in the day was that like investing in ETFs was too boring, right? Like, oh, I don't want to invest in ETFs because it's boring and I'm an investor and I just like want to manage individual stocks. What I realize now is that is such a flawed mindset. In fact, the biggest lesson that I actually can share with you guys today that I found is being almost entirely ETFs today doesn't make me feel any less of an investor than when I was managing a portfolio of like 26 individual stocks. So let me like rephrase that or resay that because I think it's so important. I feel just as much of an investor today owning 2 to 3 ETFs than I did when I was all up in the mix managing 26 individual stocks. It's just that your attention gets focused on different things. So instead of looking at the earnings reports and checking your stock tickers every day, I don't even check the prices of my ETFs because again, it doesn't matter if I'm broadly tracking the market, but my mind is still focused on, well, how much more can I contribute to my portfolio? And if I put an extra 50 or $100 a week into this fund or that fund, what's that gonna do for me? The pockets of what you need to like focus on in the investing world change, but you are still, I would say a finding for me was that I'm still such a proud investor. It just is different. Does that even make sense? It made sense in my notes, but as I say it right here, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, huge finding. And if I could go back, I certainly would have done this earlier. Number 3, again, sharing from a personal experience here. So these are, I guess being vulnerable and sharing with you guys the truths of it. A mistake that I have made against all my judgment and what best practices is pulling out your investments for X, Y, and Z. Now, I shared an example, like the first time I ever did this was way back when I was like young, and I pulled out $1,000 from my RRSP to go to an all-inclusive vacation. So first and foremost, terribly stupid decision back in the day. I obviously didn't have as much money, so that's where the capital was, and I pulled it out to go on a trip with my high school friends. Double whammy was that I pulled it out of my RRSP, which is, for those that are familiar with the RRSP, that's a foolish move because when you do that, not only are you taking an income, but you don't get that space back. Like TFSA would have been a much better place to do that. Don't ask me why. I was like probably 18 or 19 or 20, maybe even younger than that. But that was a mistake. In following years, there have been situations where I had a larger tax bill due just based on the way, my income was structured, and I was making money from the business, and it's not like your typical job, so to speak, where your income, they're withholding the appropriate amounts. I learned very early on that, painfully, that if you're not really on top of the amount of dividends you're taking out from your company and your income, you could be hit with a fat tax bill. There have been times where I've had to take money out of my investments to pay off those tax bills. And then obviously one other thing that was big, which I don't know if it actually classifies, but I ended up selling my entire TFSA to put towards a down payment. Now, again, I feel like that's excusable because, again, it's just shifting from one investment to the other. I got the space back, and then it's just a matter of rebuilding. It's not like I was doing that for like a silly purpose. It was, in my opinion, actually a very good move, and a move that was very important for me at the time. All that to say, though, is that when you get in the habit of being able to access and touch your long-term money, that's a very slippery slope to go down. Like, if I could go back and talk to my younger self, it would literally be that the money in my investment account is off limits. Like, do not touch it. The money that you're putting here, particularly in your RSP or money for your long-term, don't even think about touching that. And if that means you need to sacrifice and build up an emergency fund or build like a little rainy day account or something that you can touch when you do need to access that capital, then that's absolutely worth it. But what happens is, and again, maybe thinking back, like maybe it was that first time I pulled money out starting from that vacation that opened that door, like it kept the door open in my mind that if I ever really need to access this money, I can. And of course, I mean, it doesn't need to be explained here, but we don't want to be touching that money. From a compounding perspective, like we want our dollars literally socked away. There could be tons of times where it's super unfavorable, depending on market conditions or how your stocks are performing. It's just a bad habit to be in. And the lesson that I would take away there is the money that you sock away for the long haul, do not even think that it is like accessible. Again, maybe in an absolute worst case scenario, like you're gonna die or something and you need it, of course. But then you guys get what I'm saying. I think that's a habit that is a bad one to go down. And if I could go back to my younger self, I'd do that. And if that means getting a rainy day fund or an emergency fund, that's what you gotta do. Those, you guys, were three that I thought were super, I guess fascinating and important, and ones that I could speak on personal experience for. Again, one of the most common ones I know, and I hope we get some of these in the comments below, is that I wish I started earlier, or I wish I got, interested in investing earlier than I did. That's not really one that I can speak on because I've been, doing investing my whole life. I wanted to draw from ones that are unique to me and ones that hopefully, although your situation may be different, there's still elements of that you can pick from and choose from and, apply to your particular situations. With that, guys, I will wrap it up. One quick announcement, if you've made it this far in the video. First of all, give it a thumbs up. I appreciate you guys. I've been super busy. I have a 3-week-old at home. I think most of you know, so been busy. But we do have a pretty exciting tour announcement for those that want to come out in person to any of the Blossom events later this year. The big one being in September. So we're actually doing it at the Rogers Arena. You might have seen my dad's post yesterday on that, but it's literally where the Blue Jays play. And we got a super cool lineup of speakers. Myself, Mark will both be speaking, but the Plain Bagel. So Plain Bagel, Richard Coffin, Ben Felix, just two absolute legends in the finance space that I'm sure many of you guys have watched or do watch on a regular basis, along with Adrian and Bilal and Joy. There's a huge slew of people at Toronto. And then we also will be coming to Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal later this year. So I'll include like a link down below for you guys to look it up. In fact, there might even be a little coupon code now that I think about it. I'm not entirely sure, but if there is, I'll put it up on the screen for you guys right now, just as a little perk for our followers. We'd love to see you guys out there. It's so cool each and every year when we get these in-person events. They don't happen all too often, but when you guys come out, take pictures, meet us, especially like Academy students, longtime subscribers, we really look forward to seeing you guys at any of these. So yeah, I'll include a link down below, but let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think of the video today. So do you agree with either of those mistakes, thoughts? Have you made them or not made them yourself? Definitely leave a comment down below. But as always, I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.